I'm Dan McKinney. I'm 88. I was born in Belen, New Mexico, July 22nd, 1926. At the age of 6 weeks, my dad, who was a railroader, moved me to Clovis, New Mexico, and I've stayed there ever since, with the exception of some time in World War II and going into Korea. I finished high school in Clovis and was drafted into World War II. Spent 3 years over there and got out and
How old were you when you were drafted into
18.
18?
I just got in on the tail end of the war, and I spent most of my time in Army of Occupation. After I got out, I returned to Clovis and worked various jobs. I had learned to cook from a friend of mine that had a restaurant, and I worked as a fast food cook for a couple of years and thought I was pretty good at it. And he was a very good cook and worked hotels in Los Angeles, so I got a good education in that. And then I worked some in high school. I worked in the theaters as an usher and then as a projectionist, showing the pictures. And after that, I was recalled to the Korean War in October of 1950, and arrived in Korea about the 10th, I guess, of January 1951, and I joined K Company, the 19th Infantry Regiment, 24th Division, January 18th, 1951. We were in various firefights up until April. I was captured on April the 22nd.
Do you remember about where?
It was called the Iron Triangle, and it's in the Chorwan Valley.
Where did you arrive in Korea at?
What?
Where did you arrive? Did you arrive in Incheon or Busan?
No, Busan.
Busan.
Uh-huh. And was taken up to the front and joined them on the 18th of January.
And then April 22nd, you were captured. Can you tell me a little bit about, I guess, that day?
Well, that's a day that most men, a lot of men, back out of getting married. But I was captured on the day I was supposed to get married. And my wife now was not a very happy camper. She had to wait almost 3 years, and we finally got married in '53.
Did she know that you were still alive? Were you able to write back to her and let her know, like, hey, honey, I'm not...
Well, I've got an unusual story there. We'd been captured about 3 weeks, I guess, and we were on the march up to the rear, to the Yalu River, and we always walked at night because they were so afraid of our airplanes. And one night we were getting ready to walk out and move some more, and there was a rumor came down that there was a bunch of Marines going to be released, and there was 19 of them, I think. It was dark, and I hollered out, "Is there anybody here from Texas?" And this man said, "Yeah, I am." I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Amarillo." Well, that's just 100 miles from Clovis, where I lived. And I said, "Are you going to get released?" He said, "Well, that's what they tell us." I said, "Would you do me a favor if you get out and call my girlfriend and tell her I'm all right?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "She lives in a small town south of Amarillo, about 40 miles, in Tulia." And he said, "Yeah, what's her name?" I said, "Joyce Ann Riley." And he said, my God, I've double dated with her. 6,000 miles away, and that guy's double dated with my wife, my girlfriend.
Oh my goodness.
He did get released, and he called her on my dad's birthday, May 31st. So I was only, my parents had gotten word that I was missing in action, but I was only from April 22nd to May 31st, then they knew I was alive.
Right. But they knew that you were captured.
Yeah, they knew that I was captured and wasn't MIA anymore.
Right.
And after he got out, he did call her, and then he went to see her, I think, visited with her. He had met her. She was in nursing school in Amarillo. And he was a student at, I think he was at West Texas University there in Amarillo. And so that's how they met. And they notified my dad, I think it was May 31st was my dad's birthday, and that's where they found out that I was still alive. And we had some communication. We got a few letters out that the Chinese told us that it was to our advantage to try to write up something about how the U.S. government had started the war and all that stuff. And so we had to put a little bit in there in order to know that our letters were going to get out. And my dad read that right now, and he knew that I didn't believe that.
Yeah.
And but that way my letters got out too, to my mother and dad and to my girlfriend. And
So back on April 22nd, whenever you were captured, did your camp just get overrun? What exactly happened?
well, we had been in several firefights and lost some men, and that Sunday they made me a squad leader and brought up a bunch of new men. I had 8 new men. And
How many men did you have total?
well, 8 in my squad.
Okay.
Company strength, I think at that time, was just under 200. The doctors at the VA hospital told me that I have suffered from survivor's guilt because as far as I know, all 8 of those men died that night. First night on the line. And I don't know, but it's bothered me ever since. I found out after we got out that our company was down to less than 50 people, that the rest of them had been killed or captured that night. And it was quite a night. It got so bad that our officers called in our artillery on our positions to try to stop them because they knew there wasn't very much of us left anyway. So they called in artillery in that area to try to stop them. And I hid out after all my ammunition was gone and all the grenades we had and everything. I got in some rocks and hid out, and the artillery was the sparks were flying off those rocks like you wouldn't believe. I thought, well, I'll just try to stay hid out and our troops will be back and I'll be all right. I come to find out the Chinese pushed us back 20 miles in that fight, and it over several days. I don't know how long, but it was a long time before they came back to where we were. So I was told that there were 26 men left in the company, And out of this 26 were 13 captured, which left the company down to 13 men. But I have no way of knowing that that was the fact.
Right.
But I know I've read some articles on K Company, and one of the articles started out that the officer went to the map and said for all intents and purposes K Company was wiped out. So we don't know. I don't know. I've read several stories about it.
So you were captured there at the Iron Triangle, and then you said you marched at night. Do you remember how many days it took you to reach the camp?
We were captured on the 23rd, the morning of the 23rd, and we walked into that camp on June the 19th, my sister's birthday. I had a lot of things happen where I could remember dates and everything.
I was about to say, like, you know all the exact dates because it seems to have, everything happened on very important days, like personal days to you.
So it was about, 60 days, roughly 60 days.
How old were you around this time?
Well, I was 24 when I was captured. I had already been through that last part of World War II.
Right.
And I was 24, and a lot of those guys were younger. They were really young because at the end of World War II, all those veterans wanted out, and the government wanted to get them out as quick as they could. They did everything they could, and consequently they were taking younger kids, not asking age, because we had kids in there who were 16, 17 years old that had been taken in for the Army of Occupation in Japan and got thrown into the firefight over there. There were several. It's one incident I know of was a young kid that was shot through both ankles, and he was captured, and it was at the Chosin Reservoir when it was so bitterly cold. And the Chinese amputated both of his feet. And he was blessed that it was so cold because it kept him from getting any infection.
Right, and
He
I guess
healed
bleeding
up.
to death, yeah.
He healed up well enough, but he had to have, I understand he had to have surgery after he got out. I never saw him again after we got released.
What camp did you arrive to?
Huh?
What camp did you arrive to?
One.
Camp
Camp
One?
One.
And where was Camp 1 located?
Well, I don't know to this day. I've been told that it was very close to Yellow River. We thought we were about 25 miles from the river and about 25 miles from the Yellow Sea, which is down on the south end where the Yellow River dumps into the Yellow Sea.
Right. So whenever you arrived to Camp 1, was there kind of like a process, like trying to think of the
It was an existing camp. There were already men there.
right.
They had been, some of them had been moved in there. They'd been captured, I think, in July of '50. But I don't know how long the camp had been there.
So while you were marching, it took you, almost 2 months to reach the camp after being captured. What were they feeding? Were they feeding you guys? Tell me, how you survived the march for 2 months.
Well, some of them were wounded. Some of them got sick from dysentery. I carried one kid for about a week on my back. Had been shot up pretty bad. And we came down out of the hills one time, and there was a road, and they made me put him down, said that the Chinese would take him to the hospital, and I said, no, I'll carry him, I'll keep him. And they wouldn't let me. They made me put him down, and I didn't expect to see him alive again. But after I got out, the first Christmas, I got a Christmas card from him thanking me for carrying him. And he said, you couldn't carry me now because I weigh 225 pounds. I said, well, you can carry me then, 'cause I don't weigh that much. And I saw him one time at a Korean POW reunion that we had all the time.
Where does he live?
Hmm?
Where does he live?
He lived in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And but I just saw him the one other time.
Mm-hmm. What were they feeding you guys as y'all were marching?
Hmm?
Were they feeding y'all as y'all were marching, or did you
Well-
kind of have to find your own food?
Well, what little we got from them. They all carried their own ration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, cotton sack about so big around and about so long. They carried it over their shoulder with a string or something, and sometimes they'd fix some and let us have some. But I went from about 155 pounds to down around about 100 while I was in there. Not all of it in that 2 months, but, and then we didn't have any access to any other food. We just got whatever they gave us.
Mm-hmm. And so how were the living arrangements whenever you arrived to the camp?
Well, they had taken over a Korean village, moved all the residents out, and most of the houses were 3 rooms. 2 rooms were to live in, and the 3rd room was the kitchen. And we were those rooms where there's 10 of us in a room, about 7 or 8 feet square. And you slept head to toe, and if anybody turned over, everybody had to turn over. And it was pretty congested, and the room got smaller when tempers flared, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a very pretty sight to have 2 guys fighting and 5 other guys watching, and all in the same little room.
How big would you say the room was?
About 7 feet square, 10 feet, not more than 10 feet square.
Mm-hmm. So what were the, I guess, the day-to-day activities that you guys had to do or go through?
Well, when we first got there, it was in the spring,
Mm-hmm.
and they made us go up in the mountains about 4 miles and carry down logs that they'd had the natives cut trees down and cut them up into small joints, sections where one man could carry it out. And we had to, each company had a 2-man saw, crosscut saw, and a axe, and we had to cut that wood up small joints where it'd go in the fireplace in the kitchen, and then we had to split it with the axe. And we had to get enough of that together during the warm spring and summer
Mm-hmm.
to last through the winter. And we usually used it all by the time spring came around. And that's about the only thing we had to do, except for the brainwashing. I got in trouble because I was 24, I was older, and I told those kids, don't believe that stuff. They'd have those indoctrination classes, and I said, you know better than that. You know what kind of country we've got at home, and you can see what these people have.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have anything.
What were they trying to convince you guys of?
Well, that communism was better than capitalism, and it's not so.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, I know it's not so. Our country's in better shape. We're free to do what we want to do and raise our own food or get our kids
Mm-hmm.
in college, and these communist countries don't have that. A few of them get to go to college, and the rest of them are like trained monkeys as far as I'm concerned. The educated ones brainwashing them, convincing them that communism's good, and I know better. Thank you very much.
So, besides, I guess, brainwashing, were y'all able to play basketball or, play cards? I mean, was there things that y'all could do to, I guess, stay entertained? And
They did have, they got some softballs and some basketballs,
Mm-hmm.
and in that spring of '53, they had some discus. They had some kind of a junior Olympics of stuff that they could have races and everything and play basketball, and that's about all we had to do. There was nothing else.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard from other prisoners, POWs, that they weren't allowed to pray. If they were, it'd be consequences, I guess, if they were caught. Was that true while you were in camp?
We never got told not to,
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't do it when they were around,
Mm.
and kept it to ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
I still had my New Testament. I don't know. On March up, they made us empty our pockets, and they found that Testament. And the man told me to throw it in the fire, and I said no. I said, you throw it in the fire. I tried to give it to him, and he wouldn't touch it. So I just put it back in my pocket and kept it. And I brought it home. My daughter's got it now.
What were y'all being fed? What was the kind of food they would give you guys?
What?
Food while in camp?
It was just rice or sorghum.
Mm-hmm. Millets.
And some tofu, I guess. Once in a while we get that.
Mm-hmm.
Very seldom got any meat. And once in a while they'd kill a pig, and I was scared of it. I didn't want to. I watched them kill them that morning and serve them that night, and I was very scared of it.
Mm-hmm.
I got by on what they had.
And so, what about clothing? Did you stay in your uniforms, or did they give you new clothes to wear?
Well, I kept my combat boots. Everything else kind of wore out. I wound up with a summer uniform, a POW uniform, and then I got a winter uniform. And I've got a picture. It's in that box that you took away of me, that was taken by an Associated Press photographer that was captured. And he had all his cameras and everything, and they realized what they had. They took him around all the camps and made propaganda pictures. And he took a picture of me one time. I didn't know it had been taken, and somebody sent me a copy of it after we got home. And it showed me in that summer uniform.
What was the propaganda that went with it? What were they, trying to...
Well, show everybody how well we were being taken care of, and they didn't show the pictures of the jails or the cages they put us in. That's another picture that's in that box you took away.
I promise we'll include the pictures. I promise.
Who what?
Said I promise we will include the pictures. I promise.
Well, you might want to take some pictures of that later on.
Mm-hmm.
One of the men that was in my squad got out, and he had his son make a cage like he had been put in. And he took it to the Korean War POW meeting one year. I think it was in Macon, Georgia. And he was going to try to give it to the Andersonville POW museum, and they didn't want it. And we were all upset about that.
Yeah, why?
Claimed they didn't have room for it.
So these cages were to used as punishment, or?
Oh yeah, if you did something wrong, they put you in there for a week, and then when you got out, you didn't get out during that week. When you got out, you had to clean up the cage, and then you take a bath, clean yourself up, and then you could wash your clothes. So it's better not to get in trouble.
Right. Things that you'd get in trouble for.
Well, arguing with them about that, or stealing food, or any number of things, any infraction. They could throw you in there for any reason in the world. If they didn't like the way you smiled at them that morning, they could almost put you away. I was in jail 75 days because of my arguing with them over the brainwashing.
You were in that cage for 75 days?
No,
Oh,
that was in another
different.
squad. They separated us from the rest of the camp.
I see. And were you a prisoner of the Chinese or North Koreans?
Chinese.
Okay.
We were never prisoners of the North Koreans. And I'm glad, because they were, from what we heard, they were pretty vicious. Killed a lot of people.
And how long were you a prisoner of war?
28 months.
And so, obviously a long 28 months. So, what day were you finally released?
August the 20th, 1953.
August 20th of 1953?
53.
So that was, a month almost after the armistice was signed. It took that long for for you guys to be released. Almost a month later.
The armistice signed on July 27th,
Mm-hmm.
and we got out on the 20th of August.
Mm-hmm.
They had to move us from where we were. It was a long ways. We rode trucks part of the way, and we rode train part of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then due process for both sides, I guess, how they were going to exchange them and everything.
Mm-hmm. So how did you guys come about knowing that the armistice was being signed and that prisoners were being released? Did they just come out and tell you guys that there was a...
They called us out and had a formation of all the whole camp and told us that the peace talks had been signed,
Mm-hmm.
and they were kind of afraid that we would riot and raise hell, and we didn't, and it kind of upset them because we were so calm. We just decided we weren't going to let them know our emotions.
Mm-hmm. You were just ready to get out. You've already been there 20 months. And
Yeah.
So would you say that the conditions maybe kind of gotten a little bit better, or they kind of lightened up that last month?
They started lightening up in that spring when they had that Olympics and everything. We could tell when the peace talks were going good, where our treatment was a little better. But if it got hung up on something, they'd go back to the old rules. And but it never did get. They said we couldn't take anything out, but I got that chest set out because I had it in a little bag that I had made,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't bother to take it away from me. And that bag laid in the closet for 50 years before I got it out. I've only had it out about 10 years.
You just decided to kind of look at it one day, and what made you kind of pull it back out?
Yeah, I don't know why.
It'd been almost 50
That
years.
first 50 years, I was in denial about it. I wouldn't talk about anything about being a prisoner or anything. Didn't have to discuss it or anything.
Was that because you didn't want to, or did the government by any chance ask you not to speak
No,
about
no,
it or anything?
government never told us.
Mm-hmm.
It's just some of the things I felt like needed to be told.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to make talks at various places, high schools and civic clubs, to tell my experiences. The Air Force Base, at Cannon Air Force Base, all Air Force bases have a Airman's Leadership School. And Cannon Air Force Base created a Wall of the Heroes, and they inducted a bunch of us into it. And not all just prisoners, but all veterans that had a story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I was inducted into it in March of 2005. And the commandant was asked me if I would come back and talk to one of her classes. And I said, yeah. So I went back the very first class after I was inducted, and That was in April of 2005. And last week, April the 16th, I made my 70th talk to a class, 70 different classes of students that they have to go through that class at school before they can make staff sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
So I've talked to every class since I was inducted into that Wall of Heroes. About over 1,500 students.
Wow.
And all I get out of it is a free dinner at their graduation. My wife and I get to go.
So, I guess rewinding, whenever you were released, where did you have to march? Did you have to march to a different place, obviously? Did you have to take a truck to Freedom Village or anything of that nature?
Did what?
Did you take a truck to Freedom Village to be released, to pass on back over to South Korea?
Well, they were trucks and train, and you mean how they got us back down there? Yeah. They put us on trucks right there at the camp. And they took us to a railhead, and we rode boxcars down to near the front of where the exchange, Pamanjom, and they trucked us on into there, and then whatever process they had for getting us out of there.
So, obviously, I guess your wife waited for you.
I got home on Clovis on September the 7th, which was Labor Day, 53.
Another holiday.
Another day. We got married October the 18th. Just took her about a month and a half to get everything together. She wanted to go to Mexico on her honeymoon, and my friend that got the Medal of Honor told me he wanted me to go to Washington with him when he got it. He called me and told that honor, that ceremony is going to be October the 27th. So I called her and told her we weren't going to Mexico, we was going to Washington. So we went up there, and we were present when 7 men got the medal that day. And we were able to see it, watch President Eisenhower put it on.
Was it a difficult process coming back home, maybe as far as mentally or physically, kind of getting back into the use of, okay, I'm not a prisoner anymore, I'm back, in my home?
We all wanted to fly home. And they said, no, you're going to have to go on the boat. Said if you flew home, you'd be quarantined for 2 weeks. But said, we've got a lot of work to do with you. And we did. I spent over 8 hours with people from the FBI and from the OSS, which is now CIA, and all kinds of law enforcement. And they wanted to know, they wanted us to try to remember every man that had died, when he died, how he died. They wanted to know about any squealers that squealed on other people or did anything against the government, against our government. And we were busy for a lot of it. And then they wanted to get us back in physical shape too. I gained 25 pounds on the boat in 2 weeks.
2 weeks on the boat and you gained 25 pounds.
Yeah, I went from 110 to 135 in 2 weeks.
What were they feeding you? What were they feeding you?
On the ship? Well, it started off just mashed potatoes and Jell-O and cereal and stuff like that. And they didn't know what kind of shape we were in or what we could handle. And it just got progressively better and heavier.
Started out.
Finally, we got up to steak and stuff like that, and they did it right. We had there was 2 medics there at the head of the line, and before you could pick up a tray, you had to take all these vitamins and everything. You didn't eat till you took your pills.
Did you have to go through any kind of like etiquette classes to kind of get you back into, I guess, post-stress? I mean, I've heard from other prisoners of war that they had to kind of take classes on how to treat women and kind of just civilians again.
No, we didn't have anything like that.
So you returned home, and a month later you were married.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I've been married 61 and a half years.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I mean, y'all were just dating whenever you were captured, and how long had y'all been dating?
We'd been dating for a couple of years, and I'd already given her a ring. We planned to get married, and that happened.
She sounds like a fantastic person, especially to wait around and not really know when you're going to come home. And
That's right. She went
that's amazing.
to one nice store in Amarillo all the time, and the man knew of what had happened, and they'd plan a wedding for every season and pick out clothes. She'd never buy them till I got out, but then she got everything done in 30 days.
Wow, that's amazing. I wish she were here with you today.
Well, she's at the hotel at home base.
Oh, I see. I wish she would have come with you. I would have loved to have met her. So you were married on October 18th. You returned home September 7th. So what did you do after you came home and after you got married?
I went back to work to theaters for a while and didn't like it, and I went to work for a man in an auto parts store, and I worked for him 11 years, and then I opened my own auto parts store, and I had it 11 years, and then I sold it in 1987 and sat down.
Kind of just
Retired.
sat back and retired, and
My wife was a nurse, and she was a nursing coordinator at high school for 24 years, and I'd get her off to work, and I'd clean up the kitchen. I'd go to the golf course, and I'd get home about 3 o'clock, and I'd fix dinner. She got home, and then I'd wash up the dishes. She retired in 1992, so I said, now it's your turn. So I just kept playing golf, and that was all. We had 2 beautiful daughters. We adopted both of them, and we're very proud of them. One's a counselor in a middle school in Amarillo, and the oldest daughter is the head of the transcription department for heart group, and a cardiologist. There's 11 or 12 cardiologists.
wow.
So she's busy.
Yeah, and they both sound very successful, and
Yep.
Congratulations.
Everybody's good.
That's amazing. So you didn't speak about your experience after you returned home. Have you been back to Korea, or would you want to?
We went back in 2006 on that Korean War
Revisit program?
revisit program.
What did you think?
I was highly pleased to see how well it was. Everything was so nice, and the country's growing and prospering, and the people are healthy, and very satisfied with it.
What do you think is the legacy carried on by Korean War veterans in the Korean War?
Well, there's the legacy right there in the South Korea. And that's something to be proud of. They've done a good job. And there were a lot of times that we weren't too happy about being over there and cussing and fretting about it, but we look back now that we paid a terrible price for that.
And
I've got figures in that box that you took away.
you make it sound like I stole them. I promise to give them back.
I'm not going to, 67, I don't know, 7,000 died, 92,000 wounded, so many MIAs and so many POWs. I don't have the figures.
Right.
They're in that box.
We'll be sure to include those as well. So taking into consideration how many lives were either lost or even just, I guess kind of uprooted, sacrifices that were made, how does it personally make you feel, I guess, knowing that it was considered a police action and not a war, when you saw firsthand that it
Well,
definitely
we always
was?
said they called it a police action. If it was, there wasn't near enough cops and it was too big a beat. But I'm satisfied that it was
Right.
the way it happened.
And in your opinion, why do you think the Korean War is often referred to as the Forgotten War? How did it get that title?
Well, you can look out there in that memorial and there's not very much on the Korean War in it. And you go out there and look at that wall with all the prisoners' names on it for World War II and Korea and Vietnam, and there's not many POWs on it from Korea.
Mm-hmm.
It was, people were sick of war because of World War II, and it came around too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why it was called the Forgotten War, because I sure remember it. But it was, I don't know. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Vietnam War come along, and everybody was really, the only difference between the Vietnam War and the Korean War was North Korea started that war. We didn't.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't volunteer to get in it. We got volunteered into the Vietnam War. And that was a shame as far as I was concerned. Those people have been fighting for centuries. That's just like that one that's going on now.
Mm-hmm.
They've been fighting for years, and we need to get out of there. I don't need the politics. We need to quit that.
So I guess I kind of have a question for you then. So in 2013, we witnessed the signing, or the 60th anniversary of the armistice. And there's no other war in modern history that has lasted 60 years after an official ceasefire. What do you think that we need to do to kind of end that hostility and kind of put a closure on it? Do you think it would ever be possible?
It's not possible as long as that young punk's running North Korea. Somebody needs to talk some sense into somebody up there and get it done.
Would you support a reunification of North and South Korea if it were possible?
If it were possible, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But not through the efforts the way they wanted to do it.
Right.
To come down there, and it's not going to happen. I'm convinced that China is popping the whip over there and telling them what to do, and kind of like a dog on a chain. They're just holding them back. They know they can't win by themselves, and they don't want them to get in another war.
Right.
China doesn't. So I don't think it'll ever happen.
And do you think it's important for younger generations to understand and know of the sacrifices and contributions that were made prior to the armistice, during the Korean War?
Sure.
Why do you think it's important for them to be aware of what happened?
Well, I think they need to know it. The younger generations need to know it, and by telling my story to these young people, even though they're all in the Air Force, they're going to remember it and they're going to understand what happened. And the Korean War veterans now have a retail program to tell it to the people.
Yep.
And it's good. I think that more people need to hear it. And That's why I do what I do.
Do you think that this is necessary, what we're doing here today, interviewing veterans and preserving their
Well,
legacy and their stories?
It depends on how the word gets out. If the younger generation can get to it, it's fine.
Was there anything that you were able to take from your experience in Korea as maybe a life lesson or something that stuck with you that you learned, I guess, while you're in Korea?
Well, there's not a day goes by that I don't think of something or somebody relating to that war, and anybody that goes through that as a prisoner, it's embedded in their mind. They'll never forget it. And I think it's vital that people understand it.